Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast today from Arden in North Carolina, the USA, Jeremy Pope, who's the founder and owner of Sales Call Overhaul, who trains and coaches salespeople, sales managers, and business owners in sales, in running sales teams, and in creating sustainable cultures. So I'm really privileged to welcome you to the InnovaBuzz podcast today, Jeremy.
I'm privileged to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Now, you've got a lot to share on sales, and also you kind of integrate that into all aspects of running a business and things like employee retention. And you talk a lot about helping givers that are kind of stuck in a taker's process. So I'm fascinated to explore that a little bit more, because it kind of rings a bell with me, or kind of hits a chord with me that I think I'd never heard it expressed like that. But I thought, yeah, there's a lot in that. So I'm really looking forward to exploring that with you. Before we start talking about all things sales process and business culture, what's the impact you're hoping to leave in the world, Jeremy?
Oh, goodness. Well, personally, my mission is to set people free, help people grow up, and help people get closer to God. And so the business impact is less, I mean, it's more focused than that, I suppose.
Yeah.
But the business impact is to help founders do those three things, really. And by helping founders remove toxicity from their businesses that has accidentally crept in, helping them install good systems in their businesses, helping them vet good people and learn to be leaders. That's really how I accomplish my mission in the world. I set founders free from a lot of the chains that they put inside their minds. Yeah. There's
a lot to unpack there. You talked about chains they put inside their mind. So a lot of these things are us as business owners overcomplicating things, right?
Agreed. And I am the guiltiest of all of these sinners. I've had so many people tell me I'm overcomplicating things. I think we've all, most of us have probably heard the story of the young elephants who are chained to a stake in the ground, and they make the stake bigger as the elephant grows. But eventually the elephant, as soon as it's shackled to that stake in the ground, it doesn't try and pull it out anymore. And at that point, the chains have migrated to it's a mental chain. It's a habit. Yeah. It's a discipline. It's a limitation on the world, whatever you want to call it. But we do that to ourselves. We take a short-term coping mechanism that we learned sometime in a perhaps a traumatic experience, or perhaps just an unhealthy experience that we had to deal with in some way, and we turn that into a permanent accidental rule for ourselves. Yeah. Ramit Sethi calls it invisible scripts. Everybody has a different way of describing that, but there comes a time when those are no longer useful. And so we have to remove those and replace them with something healthier, so the old one doesn't come back.
Yeah. And I love the metaphor of the elephant, because when you see visual representations of that story, you think, why doesn't the elephant just kind of walk away? Because that stake is not strong enough to hold that elephant. The elephant has much more strength than is required to just pull that stake out of the ground and walk off.
That elephant has been trained, and we train ourselves intentionally and accidentally. You can never stop training. It's impossible. You're always training yourself to do something. So
that's right.
Hopefully mostly healthy things.
The other thing you mentioned there, the toxic environment. Tell me a little bit more about that and explain that.
Oh, yeah. So a lot of the folks that I work with, this is a direct outflow of my personal experiences. And so I have been in a few toxic environments myself. I think most of us have. I've been guilty of creating toxic environments myself before. I think most of us have, and not because we have bad intentions, but because we are operating from perhaps fear or an old family pattern that our parents ran on us. And so we're operating out of anger with our employees or something along those lines. And so, or maybe a boss that we looked up to in some ways had some very unhealthy habits, and we're trying to be like that boss. And we picked up on the unhealthy things just like we did on the healthy things that they taught us. So there are, when people are hiring, a lot of my people, they're hiring their first sales teams or their second sales teams after having failed with their first sales team. It's their second batch, and so they're a bit more, a little bit more cautious and deliberate about the way they approach it. Everybody, when they need a sales team, they need that sales team operating as quickly as possible. That's a given. But being able to take the time to strategize this a little bit and to make sure that we put in systems that support healthy mindsets. For example, a compensation structure for your salespeople that does not create perverse incentives. And there are a couple of ways I see perverse incentives created. One is with commission tiers for hitting certain quotas. And another is a commission cap. So a capped compensation. Once someone hits the cap, you're either going to lose A players at that point or they'll become B players. It's a very rare person that can remain an A player and know that they are far ahead of the rest of the pack without the reward that is deserved there. And so those are just a couple of ways that perverse incentives can be created with compensation specifically. But there are all kinds of ways that we can accidentally create a system just because we don't know any better or because we heard it and it sounds like a good idea. There's so much voodoo and rumors that fly around in the sales world because we just don't have the data. We don't have the insight into what is healthy, what works well. And we might not have access to studies, or we might not know how to look up those studies, or we might not feel they're relevant to our situation. We might not have the expertise to apply those thousands of data points available to our own situation. And so it's not that we're intentionally creating a toxic environment or an abusive system or something along those lines, but it happens, and it happens pretty regularly without us realizing. And so with a little bit of deliberation and a little bit of experience around those things, we can create a healthy culture in a sales team at every level, the owner level, the manager level, and at the salesperson level, that allows for tremendous growth and healthy collaborative competition. So co-opetition, Richard Koch talks about it in his either STAR principle or 80-20 principle. Or no, I think it's in Super Connect. I think that's the book that he talks about that. But that co-opetition in a sales team, 80% collaboration, 20% competition, is often a very healthy. It creates a healthy vibe inside that team, and keeps people from getting cutthroat and keeps people from getting lazy. And so there's all kinds of balances and tensions that have to be found and managed. And just having a little bit of help with that can make a big difference.
So an example of that might be, you're talking about incentives, might be there's a individual incentives plus team incentives, a combination that help people, okay, I'm going to work really hard individually to achieve the highest possible individual incentive I can, but there's also an incentive for me to help my team members that I'm competing with at an individual level, maybe mentor them, maybe if I'm the more experienced salesperson, mentor the younger ones to get them to achieve the highest incentive that they can to be as successful as they can, because that means I also get rewarded on the team incentive. Is that an example?
That's a great example. And you have to do that without taking away your top salespeople's time from their highest leverage activities, because that can hit you in the bottom line really hard. So there's those. It's a great example of those balances. In the book Compensating the Sales Force, they actually talk about how, as a rule of thumb, 80% of the variable compensation that you're paying a salesperson should be under their direct control. And I've found that's often a good starting point. If we have a team spiff, like a special performance incentive fund spiff, and you've got commissions, if 80% of it is individual commissions, and then 20% of that comp can be expected to come in that spiff from other types of activities, that can be a very healthy starting point. But keeping it as simple and ungameable as possible while incentivizing the highest leverage activities and good culture can absolutely be done and should be done. And it's tricky, but it's worth it.
Yeah. It reminds me of one of the first student holiday jobs I had, which was not a sales job. It was in a paint factory in their storeroom. So taking the cans from the end of the production line, stacking them in their location in the storeroom, from where they are then loaded onto trucks and shipped out to the stores and end users and whatnot. And there was an incentive program for the workers there that was based on how much material you stacked. But of course, there were different size cans and different locations where they had to be stacked. So there were very large cans that had to be stacked in the lower levels, smaller cans that had to go up higher. And there were different points allocated to each can. And there were 6 students that worked there. And when I arrived, these guys had been there for several semesters. They kept coming back, and they'd worked out the system, and they taught me what to do. And they said, these are the what, like, you select which cans you put away, because these are the ones that you can be most efficient with. You can pick up 4 at a time. They're at sort of waist level, so you're not lifting or doing anything. And avoid spillages at all costs, because spillages you have to clean up. You don't get bonus for that. That costs time. And so what would happen was we'd collect the bonus and we'd just submit enough points to get the full bonus. So they had a cap on the bonus. And we'd collect the others. So it was all paper based. We'd hold the others in the pocket for the next week. And so if you had to do a job that wasn't as efficient, that didn't get you as much bonus points, that was okay, because you'd build up this buffer. And as a result, of course, the guys that worked there regularly hadn't worked this out, because I guess as students we were very clever. But as a result, of course, our productivity was nowhere near what it could have been.
That's such a great example. When you're dealing with quotas, especially relatively short time periods in quotas, you have to figure out how to cancel out the sandbagging. Just like you were talking about, the insurance commissions that you can set for the next month, just in case you're a little low. So that's one reason that I really dislike capped commissions. It encourages sandbagging, and it encourages telling a new potential client or customer to wait until the next period begins. It's extremely common. And so you can set that kind of thing up in a very transparent way. I mean, if you set up a rolling commission structure where it's a rolling average over a certain period of time, then it can make it very hard to play that game. And it gives your salespeople the knowledge and the feeling that you're kind of looking out for them. But so it eliminates their incentive to play unhealthy games with it, but it also gives them that buffer built in if they get sick or et cetera. So having a structure where your people understand that this structure is built to look out for them is a really powerful thing. And discussing this with your team and getting buy-in from your team. I have seen a large number of sales leaders who have, or business owners, or people far removed from the sales team is usually where it comes in. They'll make a change to the commission structure and they go, oh, I don't know why we had our 2 top salespeople quit. It's better commissions for them anyway. And when they did the math, they were technically correct, but they didn't sell it beforehand. And so it was difficult for those top salespeople to feel taken care of, to understand what was going to happen. And they weren't on the same page motive wise. They didn't feel like they were on the same team. It felt like an adversarial thing. And when you get that adversarial psychological element going on, it requires immediate correction if you want to keep these people, because they are not long for this world. Once you get to the point where they're feeling adversarial against management, or worse yet, if it goes as far as feeling adversarial against the clients, that's really where you get into salespeople who start. Easy example. There's some parallel behaviors in the world that in the corporate world, they found go together really closely. Sexual harassment and embezzlement are 2 behaviors that in the past, 15 years, something along those lines, they have found that when someone is getting disciplined or reprimanded or fired for sexual harassment type stuff, you immediately go look for embezzlement as well. Because it comes from the same mental place. And so once you start getting that us against them, that bunker mentality, either against management or against customers, you start having to look out for a lot more games playing and even like con man type behavior. The willingness to sell something that is not a good fit for that client, things like that. So there's so many good reasons for the safety of your company and for the scalability and saleability of your company. Build a healthy culture. Was it Peter Drucker who said culture eats strategy for breakfast?
Yeah.
That was him. Yeah. I love that quote so much because a healthy culture will create good strategy. If you're bringing in high performing people who are healthy together and they're a good team and they enjoy each other and everybody's kind to each other, high performing kindness, boy, that's hard to beat.
Yeah. I was speaking. In fact, I think as we record this, we're publishing this week the episode to Chandler Walker, who his whole philosophy is
Chandler.
Around building a culture of care. And this is essentially what you're talking about, isn't it?
Very much. Yeah, he and I are very much on the same page on this stuff.
Wonderful. One of the things I referenced in the introduction was what you talk about, a giver stuck in a taker's process, and I think it's kind of a natural progression to start talking about that, because you've talked a lot about culture and building that culture of care and a healthy culture with a focus on salespeople. But of course that pervades the entire business, doesn't it?
Fish rot from the head down. You must have it in leadership in order to get it in any department that it's showing up as a problem in. Yeah.
So, talk to us a little bit about this idea of givers and takers, and givers being stuck in a taker's process.
There are any number of good sales processes out there. It depends on the funnel. It depends on the industry. It depends on the size of your client, almost more than anything else. Are you selling into committees, into Fortune 500, and you've got a 8-month sales cycle, or are you selling to sole proprietors, or are you selling at a cash register being Walmart. And I mean, so impulse buys aside, like where a salesperson is actually necessary, we get above the impulse buy territory. That's really just shopping cart territory. We can let the computers handle that stuff. But when you get into, some people call it high ticket selling, that's a particular sub niche that I have a lot of clients in. So I use that terminology, but it's not necessarily that high ticket. Usually people mean $3,000 and up, things like that. So, but basically I usually define high ticket as at least a third of the car that your target client would buy. So if they're buying $100,000 cars and high ticket, okay, let's call it $35K. If they're buying $12,000 cars, okay, then $4K is going to be high ticket for that person. So in the internet marketing world, which I have a lot of roots in that world, in the coaching world, in the coaching coaches to coach more coaches world, there are a lot of BizOp style trainers, like learn to be a coach, things like that. And that industry, I quickly found it has a very particular vibe to it. There's a very, I don't know if patronizing is exactly the right word, but there is a very authoritarian vibe in that world. Here's how to do it, and are you going to forego this opportunity? And if you don't act now, you'll be forever a loser. There's a lot of that. To use really crass language, but It is. They do use crass language. As long as Facebook will allow them to get away with it, they'll use it. Facebook doesn't let them do as much as it used to. So some of that has changed, but that's sophistication. I mean, sophistry. I mean, sophistry is lying. Sophistication is just learning to layer lies on top of true feelings, right? So it only gets hidden. It doesn't get eliminated. The mindset is still often there. And a lot of the reason for this is because they're selling to addicts. They're selling to personal development addicts, or they're selling to business in a box addicts, or things like that. And there's a specific tone that starts to pervade. I mean, we've already discussed that. So the non-addicts who are making a business out of this, or the recovering addicts who are making good for the first time, or something like that, if that's the world that they come from, if that's the sales style that they've heard from their BizOp trainers, and that's the scripts that they've got in front of them, and et cetera, then there's a lot of very high pressure methods being used in that world. Fake scarcity, nonsensical timers, all kinds of fast action discounts or bonuses, or things like that. I love a good fast action bonus. I do not like fast action discounts. I mean, my price is my price. Why would I like set up a situation where I'm guaranteed to give you the impression that I'm lying about my price, So all kinds of things like this. And there's very little trust in that world, but it's an adversarial kind of thing. Sales trainers talk about twisting the knife, or salting the cut, or backing the ambulance up to the door. There's a lot of metaphors for these.
That's right. Yeah.
And they're not wrong that the world of emotion is the world of action, and the world of imagination is the world of action, and the world of calculation is really just, it leads to more calculation and more analysis. So they're not wrong that we have to activate the imagination, but there are healthy ways to do this. And a lot of the givers out there who are like building something real, and they deliver good products for their clients and customers and services. I love service businesses more than product businesses, honestly. You can do all kinds of fun, creative things with the packages and everything. But those givers who have learned a taker process, a high pressure sales process, or maybe not even learned, but just been inundated with it for the last 4 years of their business, their fledgling business life, that has to stop in order to have a sustainable business. And if you want a good reputation and you want low churn, which is vital once you get into the strategic numbers of exit, you have to have good numbers on the back end. And if your churn is high because you're getting a lot of refunds, you're getting a lot of chargebacks, you're getting a lot of just people who are not so dissatisfied that they'll yell about it on social media. Like if that's your bar, then there's a significant problem with the company. And it's not just a cultural problem, it's a numbers problem, and it pervades every area. And so moving that into a giver process where someone who wants to do good in the world and is trying to do good in the world and probably is doing good in the world, when they can feel natural in their sales process without using a high pressure trainer's script or process or flow or whatever they call it, when they can feel natural, they instantly start closing better. Just because they feel natural.
And then, they also attract the right sort of clients because there's a rapport built up, which you talked about sustainability, and that's where those clients are likely to be more easily satisfied by that person. Yeah, repeat customers, but more easily satisfied because they're on the same. They share common values and common philosophies in business and probably in life as well, but most importantly in business. So therefore, they're going to be much more aligned in what they're doing together. So it's more of a partnership. Whereas, and I've been there before too, where you
likewise
succeed in convincing somebody that you don't have that alignment with, and at some point it just ends up in resentment, and it's costs much more energy to satisfy that customer, and in the end it doesn't work. It's not going to work out. So it's better to.
It costs so much. The numbers are not sustainable. Yeah, agreed. I love the methods that I teach are about letting the system do the heavy lifting, so that you are not putting pressure on someone else. You are building tension from within. And I say that there's only two things you can do on a sales call. You can build desire, and you can reduce risk, or fear of risk, some people call it. Building desire really happens in two ways. You've got your uncovering the pain. We're not creating pain. We're not twisting the knife. We're not doing anything but we are fully uncovering the pain. In EMT paramedic school, or even in EMT basic school, they taught us, if you can't see it, you can't treat it. Just period. You must be able to see what you're dealing with. Modesty be damned. You must save their life. It's way more important. They will thank you later, kind of thing. And so, one of my favorite coaches, William Attaway, says there is kindness in clarity. He says that pretty regularly. And so you do have to have that clarity. You do have to uncover that pain that they may be hiding from.
Yeah.
You don't have to go overboard with that. You do have to dig deep enough to get everything. You have a duty to be thorough with this. And a lot of the givers are not being thorough enough. So I often get them to go where they need to go there. And then so that's one part of building desire. The other part of building desire is helping them understand their own values, their own vision, their own goal, their own desires for moving forward. Like, what's the future state there that they want to be in? And sometimes you have to build this part with people. The pain, you only have to uncover it properly. If you don't have enough pain, if they don't have a $10,000 problem, you can't make a $10,000 sale. Done. The end. Right. You can't turn them into something they're not. You can't turn them into someone they're not. And that's a lot of the essence of high pressure sales mindsets that I find in givers who are trying not to be high pressure. They're trying to find the magic words that will turn someone's situation into something it's not.
Yeah.
Like if
it's force fit, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So as long as they are the right person, they have the right problem that you can solve and the right vision that fits with where you can help them get, then uncover it and help them build it. I mean, you have some Lego pieces that they may not have, your experience. In B2B sales, it's more common for people to have a more thorough vision already built out because they may have done it on paper, or they may do it quarterly or something like that. But you still may have to do a little building with them. It's not just uncovering the vision a lot of times.
That's right. Yeah.
And
also they might not have a vision of what's possible. So if you can uncover the pain or the problem, and they're talking to you because they don't know what the solution, how to solve that, right? How to address that. And so they may not have a vision of what is possible.
Right. And that's where a lot of things like the challenger sale come in. One of the strengths of the challenger type of sales is providing insight, challenging your new friends' thinking, and giving some amount of education. And I found that a lot of people who are trying to go that direction, they think they have to be doing it from a place of authority. And authority doesn't hurt. But when you're trying to get to authority, you can often get on the Cartman drama triangle where you're persecuting rather than being authoritative. And so this person is not your victim. You are not here to rescue them or to persecute them. You could stay entirely off the drama triangle. But when you can be vulnerable with them, but do you mind if I share a sales technique?
Absolutely. Yeah. I was going to ask, can you give us some examples of how this plays out? Yeah.
Okay. So I teach a $100 workshop on primarily this technique with 2 or 3 other things to support it. But the core of the technique, this is the price upfront technique, it sounds like this. Will you role play with me for a minute?
Sure.
Pretend that you're a prospect of mine.
Yeah.
So Jürgen, you told me you have to start every role play with the person's name, by the way. Did you know that? I have found that with every sales coach, including myself. Like, we can't turn the role play on. Our mental switches don't work unless we start with your name. So
fantastic. There's a lesson there.
It's like a mental crunch.
Yeah.
So Jürgen, you've mentioned that you want a sales team in place and that you need it to be happening pretty fast. I am not the world's smoothest salesperson. I get clumsy and awkward, and I'm really here to figure out if this is a fit for us. We do a lot of sales ops stuff. We help make sure that your recruiting is in place. We help make sure that X, Y, Z, et cetera. But I'm feeling a little tension around money. And do you mind if I just tell you the price right now, and then we can spend the next 40 minutes together figuring out if it really is a fit?
Sure. Yeah. Sounds good.
Thank you. Okay. And no one will ever tell you no to that. I mean, price is one of the biggest things on their mind, of course. So they're here to hear the price.
In fact, I think that's a great approach, because if you start talking about, here's what we can do, here's the benefits, here's how it's going to work. Right. In the back of my mind, I'm listening to this, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I wonder what this is going to cost. Sounds great, but I wonder what this is going to cost. So I'm only really half listening. Now, if you tell me the price up front, I'm either going to say, nah, I'm sorry, that's way out of my budget. Or I'm going to say, I can swing that. And then I can put that aside and really listen to the rest of what you have to tell me.
You've nailed it. You've nailed it. So that's the first half of the technique right there. And when we get that commitment, yes, I will stay with you for 40 minutes after hearing the price. So now we have a way of gauging this person's integrity. We have a way of gauging like how much they care about how big of a problem this is to them. Like, from the very beginning, there's so many people that teach, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how how excited are you about this kind of thing, like a temp check kind of approach. This does a lot of the same thing while giving them data and putting you into a collaborative, let's pull together against the problem instead of pulling against each other. Yeah. So they say, sure, like you did. And then the last part is, okay, it's $18,000. Okay, now I can relax, and you can scream, or you can make faces at me, or you can run away, right. Whatever you need to do. Are you okay? Or should we even keep talking? Is that even in range, assuming that this really does solve your problem and you have a problem big enough to put that kind of money in? Should we even keep talking? Yeah. And then you get that's in range, or that's tough, but let's talk, or oh no, that will never work for me. And you know exactly where you are then. If you get a yes, you are 65% closed at that moment, at the 5-minute mark of your call. So you're really just staying out of your own way from that point forward. Just make sure you talk about what matters to them, only what matters to them, not what you want to talk about. If you get a maybe, then, that gives me data about how you're feeling about this. This means this person may have some financial issues around that price point, and we might have to do a financing plan of some sort. I'm not going to be their bank, but I have financing available. That's what a bank is for. It might indicate an interest level is a bit lower, or it might indicate they feel like they have some really good other options that are way cheaper. And so I'm going to be kind of exploring those other options with them and finding out, okay, what's the competition like in the rest of this call? But now I've got 40 minutes of vulnerability, transparency, humanity, and the ability to move very deep, very, very quickly. A lot of people have heard the phrase trust equals speed. And when you're making a deal, trust equals speed. You don't have to audit each other. You don't have to do so much due diligence when you already trust each other. Vulnerability, transparency, and humanity really gives you a lot of trust. And the sooner you can get that into your call in a systematic way, the faster you'll be able to go deep, and the more you'll be able to compress your sales cycle, whether it's normally a 6-month sales cycle down to 3 months, or whether it's a 2-call close down to a 1-call close. Trust equals speed. And so build that trust very quickly.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that. And also a
lot of it's pulled from Sandler sales. I started doing a version of that using Sandler sales. Anybody who's studied Sandler in depth will recognize that general approach there.
Okay. Well, we have spoken to somebody from Sandler Sales a while ago.
It's a good methodology.
We didn't talk about those tactics. So thanks for sharing that. It's wonderful.
Sure.
Yeah, and you talked about the sales cycle as well, and there's a lot in that where when you don't have that transparency, there's a lot of back and forth that happens. If the interest is high enough that conversation continues, there is a lot of back and forth to kind of uncover a whole lot of stuff that probably comes back to that pricing, because that's always in the back of the mind.
A lot does. When you get into enterprise sales and into like split sales, where you have a sales development rep and then an account executive, and they're working as a team, front end, back end kind of thing. Generally speaking, the SDR is going to be doing T-Bank or some version of the T-Bank. So time, budget, authority, need, and challenges, or BANT. A lot of people call it BANT, so just budget, authority, need, and timeline. I like to make sure that we're addressing challenges as well, like challenges with moving forward, challenges with not moving forward, things like that. But that kind of thing is important for the discovery process. And sales is, like, when you're doing collaborative sales like this, the discovery is the sale. Like, that's one thing where I agree with Sandler deeply, is it feels almost content free. Like, you don't have to pitch people. You just talk about what they want to talk. And when they trust you to say, yes, our thing solves your problem, they will press the button. Like that's it. When you talk about what they need to hear, and when you answer their questions in an open and transparent way, then you don't have to have magic words, because you've got the magic feelings already. There are no magic words, and you don't have to look for them anymore. And so that T-Bank, you must get those answers if you're going to have a reliable sales process. You can still sell without knowing the answers. They have to be there. That they have to, like, the needs and the challenge, the budget and the authority to sign and all that stuff. It has to exist, but you can still make a sale without knowing if it exists. It's just not reliable at that point.
Yeah, that's right.
When you have a system that lets you know every time whether these things exist, boy, it's required for scaling a sales team. It's absolutely required. And trust, that vulnerability, transparency, humanity, that trust allows you to get those answers way earlier in the process and to accelerate the development of those answers if they don't have the answers themselves. You can develop those. But think about how many times we as salespeople get fooled by, this wasn't the decision maker after all.
Yeah, that's
like in
right.
corporate sales, that happens constantly.
So, it does
and they don't
a lot.
necessarily mean to fool you. They might, because they're satisfying their own ego or something like that. Or they're playing the rescuer game where, I want to help the salesperson out, but they end up stringing you along because they're trying to be nice to you or something like that.
That's right. So, and that's and often they're given a task, but not a task to kind of progress that initiative, but not necessarily the authority to make the final decision. And then when it comes to selling it internally, they aren't able to do that.
They don't have the juice for it. And so getting into a system, getting into a process that allows you to be human with people and them to be human with you, it lets you get the data you need, and it lets you get to the people you need to talk to without ego getting in the way or without the need to save face. When you eliminate the need to save face right up front by dropping your own face, I get ridiculous about this stuff. I'm nervous right now. Like, tell people you're nervous. There's no reason not to, people, how many times have we seen someone go on stage and they're a little nervous and they have kind of a shaky start, and we're all rooting for them to get it right. Like, it's so empathy building, it can hurt you if it's applied in the wrong way, or if it's applied inauthentically. But if you're talking about the right stuff, if you're talking about the things that matter to them, and you're a little nervous, or you're a little shaky on something, or you're a little bit dumb on something, and you have to go brush up on an idea, then it just saves your bacon. It saves your bacon because you're talking about what matters to them, and you're willing to be transparent, and they're willing to be transparent back with you.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And the focus very much on what matters to them. I think that's a really important part of that, isn't it?
I think it's the most important part. Yeah.
This is really fabulous, Jeremy. I could go on digging into this for ages, but I'm just being alerted by my color change timer here that sort of
it's time
in my peripheral. So I think it's a good time to move on to the buzz now, which we've sort of covered a lot there in the culture of sales at a very high level, and a couple of really great examples that I love. So I think it's a good point to leave people to find out more at your website, which we'll touch on in a moment. But let's do the buzz, which is our innovation round. Same 5 questions that I ask of every guest.
Okay.
And the idea being you'll give us some snappy answers that'll inspire the listener to go and do something awesome as a result today.
Can I give snappy non-inspirational answers?
No, that's
those are much easier for me.
I'm sure they'll be inspirational. So what's the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Innovative in general? I think it depends on the person. There are a lot of different paths to innovation. And for instance, in StrengthsFinder, my number one strength is individualization. So I strongly believe that everyone has a different method of success available to them. And find that for yourself, and you will find the innovation that you need. I put so much work into self-discovery just to notice what I'm good at and what I'm bad at. And I have found that when I am allowed to go deep, when I allow myself to go deep into one thing, I start getting a lot more ideas around that thing. So giving myself the ability to build experience in that thing through the lens of innovation is a very big deal for me.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of great tips there, because I think that what you've said there, going deep and focus intensely, brings up a lot of ideas. That certainly works for me as well. But the other part, understanding, doing some self-reflection and self-development, understanding what are your strengths, what are you good at, and where areas of weakness that, well, you probably shouldn't sort of spend most of your time on that, but on the other hand, there's opportunities there, and if you decide I want to be better at this particular area, then that's an opportunity for improvement.
Speaking of going deep, I have a better answer now that I've thought about it a little bit. Find the mental models that work for you. And it's the same thing, but more actionable. There are books. Peter Holland's Mental Models book, Kip and Dan Heath, Decisive, Mark Fox, Da Vinci and the 40 Answers. There are all kinds of books that talk about how to think, like thinking structures that we can just put in place, like a unit multiplier in math class. You plug in numbers in the front end and other numbers come out the back end in the right way. So you find mental models that work for you, and you will do far better than if you are muddling through without being clear on what model you're using at the moment. Charlie Munger says you need 30 mental models in this world. And once you've got 30, you basically never have to think again. You just plug it into those mental models and you're good. So choosing the model to use is hugely important, in my opinion.
Excellent. All right. And we've got 3 additional book recommendations there as well. So I'll add those to my reading list. I'm familiar with, I'm familiar with How to Think Like Da Vinci, which was
I don't know that one. Okay, I'll look that one up. Thank you.
Gelb.
Okay,
Michael Gelb. Yeah, but the other ones you mentioned, I'm not familiar with.
I won't type thunderously under my microphone right now, but I want to. I'll look that up as soon as we're done.
I'll give you that later. What's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
Oh, I think those are the best things I've done to develop new ideas. I don't think I have anything further to add on that one.
Excellent.
Maybe collaborating. My personal approach is very collaborative. I found that with my, I love the wealth dynamics assessments from Roger Hamilton at Genius U. And with my particular one, he says that this person thinks on their feet. They find their feet on stage, basically. So I start talking and then I start thinking is kind of how it works a lot of times. So if I have a sounding board, I think very differently than when I'm alone. And both are important, but being willing to think in cycles and not having to be on all the time, not having to be at 100% peak performance all the time was a great relief for me. And it's given me a lot more progress in the past few years. Kind of slow is smooth, smooth is fast kind of approach. So relaxing and finding what works for me. That happens to be collaboration a lot of times. Excellent.
Love it. Okay. Well, what, do you have a favorite resource you use a lot?
Yes, I am. A lot of my friends know me as someone who always recommends a couple of books in any given conversation. So books in general, I don't know how to be more specific. Just
that's good. And we've already seen examples of that. I think you've given us 5 if my count's right.
It could be. I'm not surprised. Yeah.
actually 5 in the buzz round. There were probably a few more before that, but we'll certainly link to all of them in the show notes.
There is one thing that I have found to be vital as a resource, but it's a built resource. It's a personally built resource, and it must be every single time. Build the vision of what is the ideal outcome, what is the non-ideal outcome. There are so many good resources on vision building, from Cameron Herold's Vivid Vision book to Dan Sullivan's Who Not How with the Impact Filter to Sean Perry's Twitter account on the I think he calls it a kickoff template or something like that. But I combine questions. So asking the questions and building that vision of what does success look like? How long does it take? Like, if you can't write down your plan, then you can't make it intelligible to someone else.
And also,
I talk about my digital crayons a lot. I have a half a plan in my head, but until I draw it out with digital crayons on a whiteboard or a mind map or something like that, and my people can understand it, we're nowhere, because I'm not going to make that project happen. I mean, my people are the best thing about me. And so they must understand the steps and the importance and how it ties into the overall vision. So that I would say is the biggest resource that I found is vision and the willingness to build vision. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. And I'm a strong advocate for that too. I've got my whiteboards over there. I've got, I've got a book of whiteboard pages, an A4 book that I scribble in, and then I just, and my digitizing of that is just photographing it so I can file it away somewhere and easily find it.
I use Evernote for that stuff. Yep.
Yeah. All right. What's the best way to keep a client on track?
Buy-in. If you've got a stick in your hand, you can hit people with it and drive them away from you, or you can build a fulcrum beforehand and pull on that stick, and it's a lever. When you get buy-in beforehand, you know exactly what that client is going to allow you to keep them on track with. And you can refer back to it over and over and over. In sales, we call these tie downs or trial closes, or, I mean, it applies within the confines of a sales call. It applies in the entire client relationship. It applies in dealing with kids, with significant others, with employees, with everyone. But buy-in is the key. Patrick Lencioni is my guy for that, the 5 dysfunctions of a team and all of his other books. I'm a huge fan of his books. He writes very simple stories that are easy for someone like me to understand.
And it comes back a lot to what you were talking about earlier, to really understand what matters to the other person. Which is
you can browbeat someone into verbally agreeing with you, but it doesn't mean they're bought in. When you check back in and you like, okay, does this really make sense? Wait, okay, tell me where I'm wrong. Like, when you actively push back against your own ideas, kind of the scientific approach of like, you form a hypothesis and then you try and prove it wrong. When you take that dual approach with employees, clients specifically in this case, then they get the chance to feel heard. They do get heard. They tell you where they're not bought in, and you know exactly what to work on or what to let go of. Like, that's a valid answer. Letting go of something they're never going to do. Like, my client is never going to become 6'10", no matter how much I want them to. Give up. Okay, maybe we give them stilts and we teach them how to use stilts for a little while, but that's not a permanent thing. So don't plan on it being a permanent thing. So things like that.
And it allows you to focus on the things that can be done.
And that starts in the sales call. That has to start in the sales call. They paid you for what they bought into in the sales call. Don't expect them to buy into a lot more after that. You have to set it up well in that sales call for a strong foundation for the relationship.
Good
They're a
point.
dance partner, not a boxing opponent.
I love that metaphor. Yeah.
It's one
All
of my
right.
favorites.
Yeah. The number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves.
Aside from be different, I mean, I think the number one thing, once enough people start doing it, it by definition is not a differentiator anymore. And so I don't think there can be a number one thing that's a permanently good answer. One thing that people can do, I don't know if this is a number one thing, but it's enough of a thing to matter in sales calls. Ask really good questions. You're sensing a theme here, obviously, but when people know that you're on the same page, when they know it here in their chest, they can feel that you're on the same page. It's a very different start for a relationship, and it allows you to access a very different pool of clients than most people are able to access. Most people are not good listeners. I am not always a good listener. I'm a good listener when I intend to be, when I turn it on. But it takes work. Good listening is work, and just accept that. Okay, it's work, just like digging a ditch or anything else. It's not something that happens to me. I happened to be a good listener this time. No, I worked at being a good listener. All right, let it be that. So when you do that, and it's like being a good interviewer. I mean, have you guested on a lot of other shows as a podcaster yourself?
Yeah. And
you can tell the difference when someone cares. And the shows that you really enjoy being on are the ones where it's a genuine conversation. If the entire thing were the buzz questions, you would find yourself having a much harder time getting guests. It's an additional fun thing, the way you do it at the end, instead of being, here's our structure, here we go. All right, let's roll. And so the feeling that both of you have the same goals in mind, or that you're collaborating to build the same goals, that is a huge differentiator. And I found I've made so many sales on the backs of a client, a client to be in 20 minutes from now, a client saying things like, I have talked to 4 other people about building a sales team, and no one has asked me that question. It's like that genius is obvious in hindsight, or it seems simple in hindsight, things like that. When you can find those kind of questions that obviously matter to your people, when you know what matters to them, and you can transmit that on a gut level, that you get them better than they get themselves, and definitely better than any of the competitors get them, that is a powerful differentiator. There's probably bigger ones, but that's been enough for me over the years.
Yeah. So it really comes back to working on listening skills. And this is something that I think is so important. It comes back to that idea of culture of caring, isn't it? That we were talking about earlier, because it's in order to really deeply care about another person, be it somebody who is a potential client or a potential partner or a potential employee, you've got to get to that point of being able to really listen for not just what they're saying or see what they're doing, but what's motivating that, what's underneath all that.
I would say effective caring requires deep and good listening skills. We can care all we want. They might not care about the same thing. I mean, we've all talked about the love languages before, probably. Gifts, words of praise, physical touch, acts of service, and quality time. If all I care about is quality time and all you care about is gifts, then if we don't learn to speak each other's love languages there, then we can care all we want, but the other person is not going to feel that. And so the listening, the paying attention to them is very required to care effectively. So yeah, I think I agree with you there. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Jeremy. This has been great. Now, where can people find out more about the work you do and maybe even get in touch and say thanks for what you shared today?
I would love that, by the way. I love getting personal emails and starting conversations about that. That's one reason that I love your platform that you've built, because of the personal conversations that the opportunities that are created there. Salescalloverhaul.com. That is the easy place to get in touch with me. They can email me at hello@salescalloverhaul.com. They can join our Facebook group from there. They can see what our products are, of course. I've got a podcast launching soon. It will be listed on that page, on that
forward
site.
To that. Yeah. What's that called?
Well, it'll be called Sales Call Overhaul.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not smart enough to come with a bunch of different names for everything. Yeah. I find one thing I like, I stick with it, you know. So
consistency is good.
Simplicity scales, right? So I'll be reenacting sales calls live on the air. And that's our Thursday tow truck episode, more on the engine theme. But I'll be reenacting broken down sales calls live on the air and fixing them on the air. So it's anonymous. Send in your calls to win that week's hot seat. It'll be a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, sounds good. All right. Well, we'll definitely have those links in the show notes along with the,
thank you.
I don't know how many books you've recommended to us so far in the conversation.
I recommend a lot of books.
Yeah.
I need to create a resources page that, where podcasters can link back to the site, and I can manage all the links for them, because that's
excellent. Yeah. I keep updating and adding a lot of books, adding new books as you discover them. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what action would you like our listener to take away from our conversation today, Jeremy?
If you didn't get notes on the price upfront technique, go back and re-listen and get that down. Practice that 10 times out loud and start using it. Out loud makes all the difference. You have a half a thought inside your head, but once you do it, once you associate actions with the thought, it becomes a whole thought. It starts to get ingrained into your muscle memory. It starts to stick. And it starts to be something you can use once you've done it. So do it. Please do it. I want nothing more than to hear success stories of people who start using this and are instantly making sales. It happens all the time. And I would love to hear your story.
Brilliant. Well, you know how to get in touch with Jeremy, but first of all, take... Finally, who else do I get on?
Oh, I've just gone on mute. I don't hear you. What happened to me? I don't hear you. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Wow. Let me look for my speaker settings. Still on the same speaker settings. Well, this will make for a fun blooper. I still don't hear you. Well, shall I finish off the podcast? In case no one else can hear you? Okay. Maybe they can hear you and they can't hear me, so we should both do an outro.
We can't hear one another.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to the InnovaBuzz podcast. He might record a new outro for this, but thank you for listening. And Jürgen Strauss is the host of the InnovaBuzz podcast and the CEO at InnovaBizz. And I am Jeremy Pope at salescalloverhaul.com. And we've had a blast together, even though we can't hear each other right now. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Well, I'll follow up later on with you.
Oh, I hear something now. It's so quiet.
Oh, okay.
There we go. I've got my speakers turned way up now.
Oh.
Goodness gracious. I do. Yeah, I've got my speakers turned all the way up.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask you what to get on the show and why.
Let's see. I love, there are a couple people. One is Chanel Robe, who is a client success coach. So if you have a group coaching program or a service program and your clients need a bit of extra help, like staying on track or something like that, Chanel installs systems like that in coaching programs and et cetera. She's a blast to talk to. Highly recommend her. William Attaway is a dear friend of mine. He's an executive leadership coach. And I've brought him into my business as a partner because I value his advice and his mental skill set and discipline so deeply. I always recommend him. And yeah, those are the two people that I would recommend. Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much. Wrapped up the show. Finalised now. I enjoyed this. So please do stay in touch.
I'd like that very much. Let's do it. All right.